Hello, everyone, and welcome to the weekly live Uno live coding stream. So I'll be like every week, I'll be doing some coding and deep diving into Uno, and some less deep diving if need be, depending on the questions that come up. And it's all about looking at what's happening in Uno and integrating some newer features and taking a look at an application that I've been building for a while now and troubleshooting into different features that are into Uno, which is called Uno SkiaSharp Fiddle, which is an application that allows to take some C# code, compile it to a WebAssembly app that you can run in your browser, and have that Skia running the C# code compiled, which is running some Skia, and then show it into the browser. So actually, I could probably show you that application right away, so we can definitely see what it is doing. So last week, what the application was able to do is you can take that code that's available here, and when you click the compile button, it takes that code that's in here and just shows up on the side. And we added last week a way to select a different set of code snippets that were added into the code. So if I click compile again, I can see now that I have that nice sweep gradient that was taken up from Matthew Lebowitz SkiaSharp samples. So that's a pretty nice one. And if I resize the application, you can see that it's actually resizing properly, and it's really re-rendering the whole thing every time. So we're running that code directly. So you can see that it's not nice, and we're probably, depending on the time we're going to spend doing what I want to do today, we're gonna be adjusting that to use the Monaco editor. Maybe not this week, probably next week. I see Johnny and Alain that have joined. Nice to see you here, Alain. I'm going to be doing some Azure, so maybe it's something that you will be interested in. My guess is that that is what triggered you here. And thank you for the congrats on the release. It was a very interesting release. 3.6, lots of new features added. And if you find any bugs, please let us know. One of the newer features is the date picker that Carl Debilly has been working on. So it's a pretty large control that we've been discussing a bit back at the Windows WinUI community call. So it's always pretty interesting to see. So if you have anything to add to that the library, to that release, and comments on that release, just let us know. It will be we'll always be very interested with the feedback. So back to the SkiaSharp Fiddle application. So one of the interesting thing that Microsoft has been working on lately is something that's called the Azure Static Web Apps. And they've started working on this a while back. And the idea behind this is to be able to basically publish your file. So when you're creating an application like a PWA, or an application like Uno, or a WebAssembly application, basically you don't need a server-side component aside from a static file server. So basically you take your files and then you push them to some dumb server that pretty much does nothing and just serves the file statically. And there wasn't any good solution for that aside from coming from the Azure side, aside from maybe storage. It was storage. Let me find the right name. I think it's storage account web sites or something. I never remember the name exactly, but the idea is that you can push your files to the storage account, and then take a specific node and publish that to as a website, and then you could push the files over there. The problem with that is that it's a storage account, so there's not really a way to take into account the fact that your publishing from a GitHub account. So no branches, no easy way to do staging, or to have a different environments and things like that. So you have to wire up everything yourself. And another big problem with those is the fact that compression was, or it still is, a bit of a problem. So that comes up at a great point. So static web apps, and the idea is that you basically link your GitHub repository or anything else. You can be a GitHub, an Azure DevOps account as well, or an Azure DevOps hosted Git repo, and then based on that, you have a set of GitHub actions or Azure DevOps tasks that you can add to your site. Or to your pipelines, so they can push to the repository. So I'm not gonna show you specifically how to set that one up from my account, because I'm not set up the right way to show you that. But I'm gonna be clicking on the button so that it sets that up properly. So I want to enable that SkiaSharp Fiddle application to be published there, and I've only made a few tests on that to be able to publish the application. So we may find dragons there, because I'm not sure if everything's going to work exactly the right way. So they're probably setting everything up inside of GitHub, something else. It's in Visual Studio Code, but we're going to be doing it from Visual Studio. So I've captured something from my other screen that you don't see here, where I've started the setup for this application. So the SkiaSharp Fiddle application. It may be a bit too small for that, but let me see if I can. Yeah, I can't really. Yeah. Okay. So the idea is that I've pointed out to my SkiaSharp Fiddle application to the master branch, and then I'm selecting what they have for build presets. There are a few build presets with. You can use, let me see the names. You have Angular, React, Svelte, Vue, Blazor, Gatsby, Hugo, VuePress, and all that kind of other frameworks and sites like that, or frameworks that allow to publish static applications. And Blazor is pretty close to what Uno is able to do. So we're going to be adjusting a little bit the pipeline there to publish the application, build it inside of GitHub Actions. So let's do that right away. So this is what I have, and I'm going to be clicking the review and create. And if I take a look at the Skia here, you can see in the GitHub in here, there's pretty much only the GitHub workflows. There's only got commensal commits and a labeler, which I'm not sure it's used that much because it's from a template from the Uno platform. So I'm going to be clicking create now, and we're going to take a look at what that does here in the workflows. So when I'm clicking create, what it does, and it's actually pretty fast. You would see that if you're deploying an application using a web application, a standard web application using an actual an Azure web app, it takes quite a while. It can take up to a minute or two to just build the application and allow you to access the content from your created web app. But when you're using applications like that with the static web apps, it actually goes a lot faster. So the application was created, and now if I refresh, I can see now that I have a new file that's called Azure Web Apps Lemon Ocean. So they choose the name. I don't know exactly how they choose that, but whatever. It's a type of they probably allowed us to link that file to the file that's to the created application. And what we can see here is that they've created a few things in there, and they're tracking the master branch and pull requests, and a few other things like the build and deploy job. So when there's something that comes up, there's a pull request that's created, then there's validation here that happens. So the validation is going to be a build and deploy, and there's a few things that are done automatically, and it tries to search for an application at app location, an API location, so you can bundle an Azure function with it, so a set of Azure functions with your app. So it automatically provisions Azure function based on the deployments that you have inside your GitHub repository. And there's also that one that's pretty interesting. And that one means that they're tracking pull requests. And it's something that I discovered and I didn't see in the documentation. But the idea is that when you're creating a pull request, there's something very interesting that happens, and we're going to see that afterwards. I'm going to be showing you that one afterwards. So now I've created I've created all this, and you can see that a build actually started, and it failed, for a very good reason. Let me see. Oh, I can't see the content. Oh, that's too bad. Okay, so I have to be logged in to see the results. Okay, so let me log in there. So let's see if I can see that content. I'm just gonna hide that list. I can see probably here, appearance. There's probably a way to hide that. Favorites bar. There we go. No, it was not a favorites bar. I think it was something else. Let me see. It was not that one. It was the history favorite button collection. Oh, vertical step button, the home button. No, not that one. Oh, favorites bar. Sorry. Only on new tabs. There you go. Okay, so we can see now that the application has been started, and the build has been started, and then it stopped because it could not detect the language from the repo. So what we're going to do here is adjust a little bit the file that comes from the repository here, and make it work a little bit better. So if I pull the changes from the repo, I'm gonna be finding the file here in GitHub here, and actually, I think I'm going to be able. I'm going to have to change that because I don't think the tokens that I have on that machine is going to allow me for changing that. But so we're going to change a few things. We're going to change the app location, and we're going to change also. We're going to add a new parameter that's added to the documentation, so we can actually go take a look at that documentation, if I remember correctly. So let's go find that in the documentation. I don't know if it's documented here. Let's see. Let's see here. No, it's not documented here. Configure app settings. No, not available here as well. So we're going to go back a little bit. I think it was documented here. Oh, there was no documentation here, so not really here. So there's a way to change that, but let me find that one out differently. So I had a set of tryouts that I did. So we're going to change this to be something else. And we're going to point to the source code starting from the root of the application. So it's actually something that looks like this. It's in there. So we take that path and we're going to point it to the root of the application. So here it's going to be, I don't know if I put it in SRC, so it's not SRC, so it's uno SkiaSharp Fiddle from the root. No. SkiaSharp Fiddle, and the name is SkiaSharp Fiddle.wasm here. And that's it for now. We're just gonna push it like that. So let's see if I can do that from this branch. I'm not sure. Let's make a new branch. Enable CI. And then I can do this. Enable Azure Static Web Apps. And see if I can push. I'm not sure if I can. I may not have the rights to do that. Yes, I do. Okay, so I do have the rights to do that. Great. So if I go back to my GitHub Actions again, I can probably see if I have... so I don't have that enabled. So I've made I need to make a PR now. So I'm going to merge that into master. Let's remove this for now. And let's see what happens. So let's see if there are actually builds that are starting up. Yes, there are. Okay, so we can see here that there's a job that's been created and a few other things with validations that I'm not using here. And we're going to go check out what's happening in that build that was just started up. So we can see here that we can see the checkout. So this is the setup of the static web apps deploy, and then we're going to see what's happening there. So the other things that are happening when running inside of Azure Static Web Apps is the fact that they're also supporting static compression, and that's one of the things that's very important when running application using WebAssembly specifically, is the fact that when you're downloading your application, it's actually quite large. At least 2 megabytes or 3 megabytes when you're running with your application. When you're running your application using the interpreter, so it's not that big, but still it's 2 megabytes and 2 megabytes uncompressed. So if you're compressing it with Broadly, it's going to be something like maybe 600 Ks. But if you're enabling AOT, then your uncompressed file is going to be around something like 200 megabytes. Not 200 megabytes, 20 megabytes, sorry. And 20 megabytes is starting to get bigger. So if you let it download uncompressed, it's not a good experience. So the idea is that if you create a file that's called, in that case is .net.wasm, and you put a file on the server that's called .br at the end, then Azure Static Web Apps is going to be able to pick up that file instead of using the plain file, uncompressed one. So that is something that we're going to try out and see if that works. But we're going to be needing to change. The bootstrapper to enable that, because the bootstrapper by default doesn't do that. So it uses a different set of compression, a different way of compressing the structure. So we're going to be needing to adjust for that. So the build failed, and the reason for the failure, so it actually built properly. We can see here that it did, and it failed for another reason. It failed because it didn't find mono. Okay, so that's where something I need to find out a way to do, because there's the mono is not installed there, and I don't know if I can use something with to set up my own container. I think I can, but we're going to be taking a look at that. So let's see. Let's see. I thought there was a way to do that. So let's find that one out. So GitHub Actions use Docker image. Yeah, that looks like a good one. So create a Docker image. No, that's not create. It's not building and pushing. I use Docker inside of GitHub Actions. Yeah, that looks like a good way to do it. Container runs on Ubuntu later. Oh, that's good. That's the one I wanted. Okay, so let's try that one out. Let's see if that can do the trick. Okay, so I have jobs here. Oh, not the right place. So I have jobs, VM. So do I have a VM here? No VM. Container and steps. So maybe I can just use that directly. I don't think there was a way to provide. So, oh, there's a run on here. There's probably a way to provide a container. Let's see if I can add the container directly. So what I want to do is use a container that's from Uno that has everything set up already. So it's called Uno platform / wasm build, and I have version 3. Let's see if that works. So it would be CI use Uno platform container. It was an image. Let's go for that. Let's see if that runs a bit better. So I maybe get yelled at because the format of the GitHub action may not be the right one. So we'll see if that works properly. So there's a few things here. So conventional commits. So that would be that one. So let's see if the setup works properly. So far, so good. I see initialize container. So this is looking great. So one of the things that makes it interesting is that the images that are backed here are ones that are running off of Azure DevOps. It's actually the same ones that are running Azure DevOps images. And if we go to, I think it's called Azure, or maybe Azure Actions, no, maybe not Actions. Actions VM, maybe. No, maybe it's not that. I always go find, I find them another way. Azure DevOps, so DevOps, Azure DevOps, Mac OS hosted agents. I find it that way because I never remember the name of their repo. And when I try to find it that way, there's a link here, and that link points me to Actions Virtual Environments. Okay, so that's the one. So Actions Virtual Environments is giving me all sets of images that are there, and those images are shared between GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps pipelines. So you can actually build your own from Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. And this is pretty nice because it's the same ones, and once you've built your container to work on one, it's likely to work on the others. So let's see if that worked properly with this. It looks like it did. So initialize container, did it use my container? Yes, it did. It used my container. So that's pretty nice. So my custom container running, I see here that it's getting everything and it's running the build. It is running the build, so it's restoring the content, so that's nice. So the build should be taking a bit longer because now it's going to be using it's going to be using all the things that enable. Let me see. Yeah, Emscripten. So it's going to run Emscripten. It's going to run all the tooling that does static linking for WebAssembly, and that takes a bit longer. So we're going to see how much longer on those actions. And Alain, yes, there's a way to install Mono. The thing is that it's not just Mono. It's actually a lot of other different things that need to be added there, and it's not good enough at this point. So I'd rather use a preset container or pre-built image so that I don't need to have everything that needs to be installed in there. So what it looks like is that the container here, so the actions are not run inside of the container for some reason, because Mono should be available there. Otherwise, it would have not failed. Let me check. GitHub Workspace. So it looks like it's not running inside the container for some reason. So we're going to try to find out why. So in here it said that it's mapping a lot of things, and we can see here that the container is mapping GitHub home runner work to this, and this should have been used for the path here for the build, and it's not. So it's running here, fetching the repository. Yeah, the build action is running in something else. So maybe I need to take a look again at the action itself and see if I missed something. Okay, so it's supposed to be running in the container, but it's not. So maybe it's using something different that I'm not seeing. The job build and deploy is supposed to be running there. So maybe you're supposed to be having a level up. So let's take a look at if we need to add a level up. It's going to be, so container steps run. So maybe it's that one. Runs on VM, runs in container. That's curious. Or maybe it's the Azure Action itself that doesn't do the right thing, because it's supposed to be using the proper path, but maybe it's not mapping the paths properly, but it's building. So if it's building, that means it's probably running it outside of the container. So that's probably not the right thing. Oh, move down a little bit too much. For some reason it's scrolling back. So it's still mapping GitHub workflow. So there's probably a few things that's still mapped properly. Okay. So that is very interesting. So let's try to troubleshoot that differently. So everything seems to be running properly, or maybe I'm not using the right thing. So it's the interesting thing is that it's trying to find mono, but it shouldn't try to find mono. So maybe it's the way we're setting up everything that doesn't, probably trying to find mono, but shouldn't. Because I think in the latest versions we tried to change that so that it was not running using mono directly, but it looks like there's a dependency on it. So we can see here that that there's that dependency there. So I'm a bit puzzled by the fact that we're not running inside of the container somehow. So search logs. If I search here, so move up a little bit. No, it's not. That path is not mapped at all. So because it should be. It should be here. So we can see here that the container the container is created from the image, and we can see all the paths that are mapped from the outer image that is running, and we can see GitHub Home here, GitHub Workflow, and the path that we're using is GitHub Workspace. And I don't see that one. Or maybe I'm not searching. Maybe I'm not searching it the right way. Could be because there's a backslash. Yes, there was a backslash too much. Okay. So it's probably somewhere in there, probably hidden in the middle. Okay, so it could be something else. So maybe it's not the right image. Maybe I chose the wrong one. So let's go take a look at other images. So if we go to Uno, or maybe I'm using a different one that doesn't have it set up, but find it unlikely. So let's say even the Bootstrapper has that, so we can probably take it the Bootstrapper. So on the Bootstrapper, we're building for Linux. Did your PR change to master? I don't think it did change to master, but it actually used the container that I added. So it looks like it changed. It used the right one. So it looks like it's the right target. Maybe it's something else. So if it doesn't work, we're going to go back to doing something different with implementing the missing compression feature, and I'm going to be taking a look at that for next week. Okay, so in here we have the Windows one and we have the Linux ones. So it's running using same thing. So it wasn't build 3. So that's the right one. And when we create containers using that one, we can see that it really has mono installed in there. So it looks like it could be something that's related to the way that task is set up. Maybe it's not running in the proper context because it's not supporting the container. Maybe it could be something like that. Or maybe it's doing something different that I have not seen. But for now, that's going to be troubleshooting for next time because it's not particularly useful to have that troubleshoot here. Okay, so let's go back to the Bootstrapper. So I was talking about the fact that we need to have compression enabled, and compression enabled means that we need to be moving files from one location to another. So the way Uno works is that when you're enabling, let's say I'm going to take that file, that project for instance. This is the Uno Bootstrapper that takes the .NET code and converts it to a website that you can publish. So when you're building an application, so that's all a set of samples that are available as part of the Uno Bootstrapper. And if you build in release, there's a step that will take all the files that are part of the site that's generated and generate compressed version of those. So if we take a look at this, so it's downloading the Mono WebAssembly, should be relatively quick. And now if we go to the folder for that project, we'll see that in the bin folder, there should be a set of files into this folder. with two. So this is the layout of an application that's generated by the Bootstrapper, and there are two folders. One that's called compress br and compress gzip. And what's inside is basically the same files that you will find at the root here. So you'll see the package folder, and in the package folder you will find the .NET.wasm file that's 7,000 kilobytes. And if I go back to that BR folder, then the structure is exactly the same, but the files are the same names, but they're compressed. And the way this works, and it was something like, because we didn't have a way to kind of a very low deployment version of that, is we're using a file, a web.config file here, which is having a few rewriting rules that take the files and match that file, and then if it accepts encoding with Brotli, then it will rewrite the URL to use the compressed folder with the same path. So it works, but the problem is that it only works with IIS, and only IIS that uses .NET 4.8. You can't use the version that uses .NET Core, because .NET Core doesn't have the same way of doing web config file, and you have to have the rewrite IIS module installed on your machine or in your web app. So that works, but it's a pain. It's a pain, and one of the reason we were having to use this is if you use automatic compression, and if you use automatic compression on IIS and you provide a let's say a very large file like 20 megabytes, then automatic compression takes a while to compress it. So for the initial experience, it's pretty bad. So that's why we were pre-compressing the file, so that there's no need to wait, and the application is just available right away without any wait time. So the way we're doing this inside of the Bootstrapper is that we're there's a step that automatically compresses everything and puts that into a different folder. So the idea would be that instead of, if I go back to that folder, the idea would be to do, instead of creating a different folder that's called compressed.brotli, is to have something like .br here. Take that file and put it next to the other file. Oop, not here. Put it next to the other file here. So Azure Static Web App would take the content of that that folder and tries to find, if I'm asking for .NET.wasm, the browser is asking for .NET.wasm, then we'll automatically go and try to find if there's a .NET.wasm.br file, and we'll serve it as .NET.wasm but compressed without and honoring the accepts compression, the compression that was requested by the browser. So when I started adding the support for pre-compression, I said, well, there's gzip, and why not add that? But it turns out that WebAssembly needs to be on the latest browsers, and the latest browsers do support compression for Brotli all the time. So it's pretty nice. It's not useful. I don't think there was any browser that asked for that in any way. So probably going to have to remove that one. So what we want to do now is just adjust the way we're doing compression, and try to move into a way that if we're building in a certain environment, like in Azure Static Web Apps, then use the right compression layout instead of relying on the web config file to do the pre-compression. So the way it's done in the Bootstrapper is actually pretty simple. It's done through the execute method here. So that's the entry point of the static the Bootstrapper, and there's a task that's called try compress dist. So that's the dist folder, and we're basically saying if the compression was requested, we're going to try to compress everything pretty much, and we're going to compress pretty much everything that was requested. So what we want to do here is pretty much change the compressed file structure here to have it compress some other way and put it at the right location. So what we do here is try to get that one out. So in here we get the files to compress, and probably the compress file is doing something with putting it in the right folder. So we can see here there's a compress base, which is a different path from the path that's provided originally. So we can actually change this change this and add a different extension depending on the mode. So there's multiple ways to take a look at this. So let's say I'm thinking out loud there, but there's compatibility to manage there. If you're using the Bootstrapper and you're deploying to an application that uses web.config, it's probably something that we want to make sure that it's not breaking. So one of the ways to do that is to have first we can probably have a mode, let's say compression mode. So let's do that first. So we can add a parameter here to the task. So all the parameters that are here are provided as part of the Uno wasm bootstrap targets here. So if you take a look at the build dist target that's provided here, so that's the target that's executed as part of MS build. That generates that downloads the SDK, the .NET SDK for WebAssembly, and then the shell task that generates what used to be called a shell, so it's not particularly relevant anymore, but it's there, and that's all the parameters that can be configured by the Bootstrapper. So there are some that are very useful, some less useful, most likely used for debugging, and we're gonna add one there to change the behavior of the generator for compression. So there's a location where there's compression that's available somewhere. Generate compress files here. And we're going to do an additional parameter that's going to be called compression layout mode, maybe. And so this is a parameter for the task itself. So we also expose always an MS build property that can be manipulated from the outside. So the idea is that when you create your project, you can also set that property with the value that's needed. It can also be rewritten or defaulted to something by the targets itself. So for instance, if we look at the top, we're going to see here that if you're not setting generate compress files, if you're not setting compress files and the configuration is debug, then compress files are not generated. So that's what we are going to change here. So we're going to do something similar here, and we say if the wasm shell compression layout is empty, then we're going to say that we're going to probably do a few other things there, but try to determine if there's a file. I'm not even sure we're going to be able to do it through here. So we're going to try to figure that out. The idea is that if there's a web config file that's provided by the application here, we're going to be changing that. So let's say the web config file, if there's a web config file, and I don't know, maybe we're going to open the file and try to find out if that file is having compressed.br, that specific string, for instance. If there's that specific string, then we can default to something that says, well, you're probably publishing your application inside of IIS, maybe. Otherwise, if it's set differently, then we can change that. If we can change that differently. So actually, let's remove that one for now. Okay, so then we can go back to our shell task, and we're going to be adding a new parameter here. So it's a compress without the spaces. So we're going to be calling that the same name as the one that was provided here. So we're going to call that compression layout mode. And we're going to be calling that also compression layout mode. And it's going to be a enum that we're going to add to the rest of the file. Compression layout mode. And that one is going to have two modes at least. That's an enum. And it's going to be called legacy, maybe. Let's call it legacy. And the other one is going to be in place. I don't know if it's in place with a capital P. I never remember. In place. Okay, let's do it with a capital P for now. So the legacy mode will be legacy is used when the config file relies on the rewriter IS module, and that one is generates files, compressed files, next to the original ones. Okay, let's do that. Then if we're there, so if we don't set anything, we can put a default value for that one. So we're going to say that it's, let's do it in place for now. And now we're going to use this. So we're going to try compress this here. And we're going to be excluding files that have been already compressed. So if it's in a specific folder, we're searching for files that have a specific extension. So let's take a look at the extensions by default. I don't recall which one those were. I think we've defined those somewhere in there. Extensions. Okay, so we have exclusions and we have compressions for the item group. We got WASM, CLR, JS, CSS, and HTML at least. So if you want to add some more files to compress, those files may be added there. You can add the same item group in your application, and you're going to be able to compress that as well. Okay, so in here, that where is probably not very useful. So we're excluding files that are in the directory that contains compressed, but we're in the mode when we are in the mode for in-place compression. That's not very useful. So we can go to the compressed files, and now we're going to be doing two things. We're going to change the compressed path base to something else. So if we're in a compressed compression mode for actually, can we use switch here? Probably. We can use switch here. So let's use switch. It's probably going to be easier to switch. So if compression layout mode, probably compression layout mode, and we want in place. If it's in place, we return the this path directly because there's no modification to make. And if we're doing legacy, then we're going to be taking that path composition here, that path combination. Sorry. Okay. And if we happen to add something that shouldn't be there, we can do something like that. So not supported exception. And it will be compression layout mode. Compression layout mode is not supported. There. Okay, so that we have changed our compressed base. Now we have to change the path here to do something else. So we're not adding an extension to the compressed file name. So we're going to have to change here to the compressed file name. We're replacing the compressed base path. So we change it. We're replacing one to the same, so that's fine. But we need to add an extension at the end if we're using the legacy mode. So interestingly, so there's a compress handler. So we're probably going to have to add compress handler. No, I don't remember what that one was. Okay, so it's source and destination, so that's fine. So we're going to have to add an extension here so we can add the proper extension at the end, because we're just passing the compress handler, but we're not saying which one that would be. Okay, so if the compression layout mode is in place, then I'm going to be adding to the compress file name, I'm going to be adding the extension that is not there yet. And let's add extension. So does it have parameter? There you go. So we get to add a parameter. Was it added? No, it was not added. Okay. Sometimes for some reason when I add extensions, when I add parameters, they're not added. I don't know if it's something else that was not. Okay, so let's do it differently. Thing extension. Let's call it in place extension. In place extension. So if we are in compression mode in place, then we can add the extension to the file. And then we'll create the directory for the file, and if it exists, and if it was not the right location, it's probably just the deleting. It's probably not that useful at this point. Okay, good. And so we got. Oh, we had it already. It's a method. Ha, not useful. Didn't take a look at the top. So it's method. Okay. So method was adding GZ and BR at the end. So now we have to avoid compressing with gzip because it's not particularly useful. So we can remove the gzip files during the build, and we're going to do same thing that we did here. But if we're in place, not in place, or actually, if we're in legacy mode, then we do the gzip, otherwise we don't. And that should be it. Okay. So what we're going to do now is change that sample here to add a new value here. We had that, sorry, it's around here. So we're going to take the parameter that's in the compression layout here. So wasm shell compression layout mode. And we're going to add that to the file here. And I'm not sure if it's going to work, but we're gonna try that one out. So we said in place. Okay. So now, because we're building a task here, I'm gonna have to kill all the MS build. It's the MS build processes that are running. No task kill. Oh, so it's the other way around. So I'm killing all the process. The problem is here is that the task that is running here, so that goes to a class, so the class that we were manipulating, and that one's loaded up inside of MS build. So if you don't terminate MS build explicitly, then you can't rebuild it because it's locked. So that's why I'm killing Visual Studio that way. So let's rebuild. So if we rebuild, then it will just go and rebuild all the code that we added so in the bootstrapper here. And let's see if it worked. So in place is not a valid value for a compression layout. So in place doesn't work. Okay, so it could be something that I had changed from the other. So let's take a look. I never remember in MS build targets if actual modes are enums are supported properly. And sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So I think I did that for the shell mode. And we're going to try to find a shell mode. Yeah, it wasn't shell mode. So I did use something different there. And it's probably, yeah, I got to parse enum property afterwards. So it's not that way. Okay, so we're going to do it the same way here. So the property is called compression layout mode. It maps to compression layout mode, and we're going to call it compression layout mode here. And we're going to change the compression layout mode property to be a string instead. And we're going to be using name of in place so that we can keep the, does it need to be, oh, that's too bad. So it has to be named completely. Okay, that's good to know. So it's a compression layout mode, so probably I have to use the full path for that. So let's see. Yes, it does. Okay, so it's gonna translate that in place to be a property. So the idea is that if we end up changing the name of that property, refactoring tools are going to find that instead of a string. So that's easier that way. And then we're going to change that compression layout mode and go to the other one to use compression, the other version, so the string version of this. Going to generate no. It doesn't want to generate a property. That's too bad. Okay, so let's go create a property at the top. So we had one already for this. So let's add another one. So compression layout mode. And compression layout mode here was supposed to be so I probably shouldn't have, yeah, so because it's named the same way. So let's use a let's call this compression layout mode. It's going to be easier to manage. Okay, so it's called this compression layout mode, and we're going to change that. So compression layout mode is here. So that's the compression layout mode here. That's the right one. The actual property is called this layout property. This compression layout mode. So we got it right, and we can change it here in the file. So we got the compression layout mode. So we change it to this compression layout mode. Then we can kill the MS builds again. Let's see if that works better. Okay. So now we can go take a look at the output and see if that works better. So we get to go in the release folder, dist, and then now we should be having files with BR at the end, and that's good. So we have all the BR files that are now located at next to all the files that need to be compressed, and that's pretty significant. I mean, it's kind of the third of the size. So that's pretty interesting. So we got everything that's compressed properly, even the .NET file. So it's even 4 times in the end for this file. So that's pretty good. So that means that with this, we're going to be able to publish an application using the right thing, using the right compression, in place compression, so that the Azure static web apps service is able to determine that it has pre-compressed files and that can serve those files properly. So that's the only thing. So the last thing that I want to take a look at is how to change the default to make sure that we're using the right one. So maybe so there are 2 ways. The first one would be, do we take a look at the existence of that web.config file? So that would be one to preserve the compatibility. So automatically, if someone compiles and we know that there's a file for compression, there's a web.config file that has the compressed BR file, the compressed BR folder string inside, then we can use the legacy mode automatically if it was not provided. Otherwise, try to find a property from the outside, like something that's provided by Azure Static websites. But the problem is that if someone uses something else but static Azure websites, they may still want to be using that pattern that's compatible. So that's not particularly useful either. So yeah, I think looking at the content of the file for compatibility is probably the best way to take a look at that. So we're going to try to find in the folder if there's something that was specified for that. Okay, so one thing that we need to do first is change the shell task so that there's actually no default string for that one, no default parameter. So let's take a look at that. So there was a question. Do you know if .wasm has any support for Google ad system, and if you can get money for each click on the website? I mean, it's a website, so you can do it's an HTML page at the base, so you can pretty much add anything that you want as part of your website, and then have Google Ads running inside of your app if you want to. There's no specific thing to do to be able to enable that. I think we had you can probably go to, if you want to integrate that, there's two ways. The first one would be to just add a JavaScript file here. So you can create a folder that's called wasm scripts and then put some JavaScript there. So we can do whatever you want there, and just if you want to load up or include something running there, that works. But there's also some type of integration that you can do. Let's go to platform.uno. If you go to our docs, then you can find in the features and controls. Oh no, maybe not that one. I think it's advanced topics. Yeah, you can embedding existing JavaScript components in wasm, and that one explains how to integrate a JavaScript control directly inside of an Uno application. So if you have any type of control that you want to add, like displaying ads or things like that inside of your XAML, this is the way to do it. Okay, so we have the disk compression mode. So this one will be null, and if there's nothing here, so this may fail for some reason. So we need to be able to determine the default value for this one. So I think we're not going to be able to parse it here. We're going to have to parse it afterwards to try to provide the default value at the right location. Okay, so if we're in the compressed disk, we're going to have to find out if there's a web.config file and try to do some validation for this. So in here we can add if dist compression layout mode is null or empty. So if the developer for the application being built hasn't specified anything, then we're gonna have to find out what we need to do. Otherwise, we can parse the property. We can parse the property there. So for some reason, the is null or empty is not validating the property here. So that's interesting. I thought it's probably built using Netsnerd too, so that's probably why. So with .NET 5, the nullable annotations, the nullable annotation do that kind of thing. So you can take if this is null, then you get into that branch. So this may never be null because that was checking it. with static websites, what are your monitoring options? That's a good thing. I think I can. Let me see if I can show you that. Yeah, I can probably show you that. So that's the Azure web app that I have here. So when you're creating an application like this, you get at least the request and data out, function hints, and function errors. So you still get a few things. I'm not sure if yeah, that's the site hit, so you can actually see the requests coming in. So that's pretty good. And there's probably another way to do. Well, there's application insights that can run there. So I'm assuming that's probably what you meant there. So application insights is probably one way to look at it. I have to say I've not tried it, farther than I've shown you. So I went ahead and deployed one site, so that worked. But we could probably try that one out next week when I get to deploy the SkiaSharp Fiddle running properly. What do you mean only one? Okay, so I'm just gonna add the bang here for now because without the nullable annotation it won't do anything. So what I'm gonna do now is to try to read the file that was there already. So we got the final package, final path here. So we can probably find that file here. So we do something like we're going to search for web.config directly. It wants to add quotes for some reason. Config. And we're going to do first or default. And it's going to be, let's do this. Web config path. And then we're going to get to try to determine if the content we're looking for is actually the right one. So we can do something like file.read all text from the web config.file path, if the file's available, of course. Web.config path. Actually, let's do it like this. So if the web config file exists, then we do something. If it doesn't exist, then we're going to be defaulting to the version that we need. So if there's no web config file, we're going to get to the in place mode. If it does exist, and it contains the text that we were looking for. So so that was, let's look for this. So that's the file that is supposed to be part of the default template. So if you're building with a default template, then that's the string that you will get. So that means that you're deploying for an IIS website. So that in that case the compression mode would be legacy. And I'm just going to be removing this as well. So let's do it just that one because I don't want to repeat that here. So if we have a file and then the text of the file contains the compressed BR string, then we're in legacy mode. Otherwise, we're in place mode. And then we're going to be moving that out to a method that's called parse dist compression layout mode. Okay. So if we're in the right mode, then we're going to get the compressed BR. Otherwise, we're going to get something else. Okay. So now if I remove my in place parameter here and I kill task LMS build again. Maybe not that one. That's a bit too much. Right clicked a bit too early. then we're going to be able to determine if so in that case, because I have the web.config file, the dist folder should contain the right output. So let's see if we have the right output there. So we're going to release the right output would be there's the compressed folder, and it isn't there. So it means that it didn't work. So it didn't work for some reason. So we're going to have to try to find out why. So if we want to debug that, because it's an MS build task, we kind of have to be a little bit inventive. So we're going to be adding a debugger.break here. Actually, debugger.launch is going to be easier. And try to determine why did this happen. So let's rebuild. And it didn't go here. So why didn't it go here? And maybe we did miss something. Oh, it didn't rebuild. So okay, so that's why. So the thing is that we have to change that, otherwise the project won't rebuild. So let's change that file. Oop, I don't know what I did. Oh, test explorer, not the right one. Is it building? It is building. Okay. So we can see here that the debugger just popped up. So we can now go and debug the whole thing. And we can't reuse the same one because it's building, but we're going to open a second edition of Visual Studio. So they have the same name, so that's not particularly useful, but it doesn't matter that much. Okay, so we hear debugging launch, and we have null here, and we don't have a web.config file. So why not? Why not? Maybe there isn't any. That could be. Could be because we're too high in the path, and that's the case. We're too high in the path. We need to be at the dist folder because the web.config file should be there, and we can see here that the web.config file is still not there, so it has not been copied yet. So we're too late in the we're actually too early in the process. We need to find out when we need to find the files from the original file path. Okay, so that's running a bit too much. Yeah, it looks like it went haywire and built a bit too much. Okay. So the path that we're using here is not the right one. So we have a few other paths that are available as part of the build task. I'm going to try to find which one is the right one. So in the shell task, we have a few others. So we have the source and the final package path, but there are a few others. There's service worker path. That's not the right one. So I think there's another. So we take a look at the top. We have the dist path, the work dist path, the manage path. There's probably the base path or the source paths. But I think so. If we take a look at the way the files are copied at the beginning, we got the generate HTML merge config. So the try compressed it is supposed to be at the end. So that's a bit curious, because it was supposed to be there. So maybe there's something else that we're not seeing. Maybe it's not the right location. So we're selecting the files at the source location, but maybe it should be at the target location. So the target location is supposed to be the compressed path. Okay, so it's supposed to be that path. Okay, so we're not looking at the right path. So let's take a look at that location instead. I'm going to keep the debugger launch. It's going to be rebuilding. So we're building the bootstrap again with the updated task, then building the sample, downloading that again, probably. There was some update, and then you can go and debug this again. And we're going to take a look at the the variables at that location and see if we get the right thing. Okay. So web config file, and then we got our file. So that's the right one. So now we get that mode legacy. So that's good. So if we could let it run, we should be getting, oh, Visual Studio 16.3 is out just now. It was not a few seconds ago. Okay, so that means that my layout that I have generated here should be the right one. So if I look in here, in my this folder, I have the two folders here that should be that are the right ones. And now if I rebuild again without the web config file, so I'm just going to drop it completely and rebuild. Let's see if I have the right content this time. But because I have removed, so I dropped I've removed everything. So do I have the this folder again? And this time I don't have the broadly compression file, and I have the folders from the legacy mode, and now I have the broadly files available here in place. Great. So now we have compatibility with this, and we can change the file. So if there's a web config file that has a compressed folder here, we're going to be using the legacy mode. Otherwise, it's going to be using the in-place mode. So if you want to use the new folder, then you're going to be using the new mode when running with Azure Static Web Apps. So that's pretty cool. So for next week, I'm going to be troubleshooting that beforehand, so we can continue and make that build go forward, and we can take a look at the applications when we're building it at the same time. So that's going to be pretty cool. And with the additional thing that I said about the PRs, but we're going to see that next week. Great. So happy coding, and if you want to be aware of the time I'm getting online, you can give me a follow on Twitch. And I'll see you next week. Happy coding. Bye.